All right, I will now call to order the City of Sherwood Budget Committee meeting for May 31st, 2022. David, will you please do the roll call?
Chair Strode.
Here.
Vice Chair Sherwood. I know he's out. Brian Fairbanks.
Present.
Paul Mayer.
Present.
Nancy Taylor.
Present.
Lana Painter. Matt Kaufman. Mayor Mays.
Yeah.
Council President Rosner. Here. Council Browse. Here. Councilor Garland.
Present.
Council Young. Here. Council Giles. Councilor Giles, can you hear us? Okay. Councilor Scott?
Here.
Okay, so it looks like we have some minutes from the last meeting to approve. Can I get a motion to approve the January 20th, 2022 Budget Committee meeting minutes?
I'll motion.
Yep,
Second.
perfect. And then, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes. So now we need to elect a new committee chair. Do we have any nominations?
I nominate Katie Strode for chair.
Second.
All right, I will accept. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Oh, wait, let's give the online a chance to, sorry.
Yeah.
I was
Hi,
for-
I'm in favor.
Sorry, I always forget about the hybrid stuff. All right, so we need to elect a committee vice chair. Do we have any nominees?
Anna Painter. No.
She's not here.
No,
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing around thing. So it's not me.
I'll nominate Brian Fairbanks.
Second.
Any other nominations? Doesn't look like it.
Do you accept?
Oh, yeah, I'm just joking. Yes, I will do it.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Oh, now my mic's working. Sorry, I don't think I was working before. All right. So now, David, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do. We do have one public comment.
Okay. Okay. Neil, are you here for your public comment? All right. Please come on up. And you have 4 minutes.
Understandable.
Lock's right there.
All right, perfect.
Good evening. My name is Neil Shannon, and I reside at 23997 Southwest Redfern Drive in Sherwood. City Council's heard my spiel before, so I'm directing most of these comments to the citizen members of the Budget Committee. I am specifically speaking to the issue of parks this evening and the use of system development charges, also known as SDCs, for the development of new parks. For those of you who may not be unaware, SDCs are fees charged to developers during the application for new building or permit for certain capital costs attributed to the city of Sherwood for infrastructure such as water, sewer, roads, and parks. SDCs are special funds that can only be used for acquisition of new property for parks or for capital costs that increase the capacity of existing parks and cannot be used for ongoing maintenance of existing structures. I am disappointed in this year's budget, as outlined at the bottom of page 42 of the document, that the current 5-year plan calls for an expenditure of more than $12 million for the improvements to the Cedar Creek Trail and $100,000 for a new dog park north of Highway 99W. Don't get me wrong, I love the work being done on the Cedar Creek Trail and look forward to walking its length when complete, but there is a component missing from this equation. That component is the acquisition of land for future parks. Sherwood is growing, and according to many of the citizens of Sherwood, growing too fast. It has been a long time in the works, but for anyone driving along the southern boundary of our city, The Brookman Road area is in the midst of a building boom. As part of this development, one park has been established, but its location was established by the developer and may not express the best interests of the city. It is my belief that the city, through the Parks Board, needs to get more involved in the selection and establishment of parks based on the best interests of the city, not the best interests of the developer. This involvement could be by influence, but at times could also involve the purchase of real property through SDC funds. I believe that this budget needs to reflect the existing need for new property purchases before new plats and new construction is planned, because if we don't, it will be too late and the opportunities will be lost. The Brookman Road development are just a small example of this need. When the much larger area of Sherwood West is considered, the need will be even greater. City Council is well aware that I have a dog in this fight. Myself and many of my neighbors are working hard to preserve a strip of land at the south end of Redfern that it could establish a wonderful trail connection between Redfern and Brookman Road. I am looking to avoid the excuse from council that we can't do it because the funds are not there. Beyond that, we need to consider the future because, as any realtor will tell you, they're not making any more land. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other public comment, we'll move on to new business.
I think that's my cue, right? Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, Council, citizen members of the Budget Committee. This is my first budget, so, to set some groundwork or framework of how I want to operate, I understand that there is a necessity of formality that it needs to occur, but I find these meetings are much better if we treat it more like a roundtable and a work session where we feel comfortable conversing and talking and sharing ideas. And, I think it's completely okay at any time to ask questions. That's what we're here for. So before I started my budget message, I just wanted to say I hope this is a situation where we can work together and communicate and to get through this budget so that we all feel comfortable and we have all our questions answered as we go forward. So with that, I'll do a synopsis of my overall budget message. This is for the fiscal year 2022-23 budget. The budget is the city's most single important policy document. Its purpose is to provide a comprehensive overview of all city funds and services and to give stakeholders a better understanding of the city's operating and fiscal programs. Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, gives best practices on what a successful budget should serve and be. It should serve as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, a communications device with stakeholders. The budget process should accomplish the following: involve stakeholders, identify stakeholders' issues and concerns, achieve stakeholders' acceptance of decisions related to goals, services, and resource utilization, report to stakeholders on services and resource utilization, and serve generally to enhance the stakeholders' view of government. The proposed budget has been developed during a challenging and difficult economic time. While we have seen the lifting of the mask mandates, we are still feeling the real-world impacts of ongoing pandemic. Inflation, supply chain challenges, shortage in goods, and labor shortages are just a few of the main challenges and uncertainties we faced in composing this budget. This budget was written with the goal of being very thoughtful while utilizing a conservative approach in preparing this document. We have taken a conservative approach to revenue growth and an aggressive approach on contingencies for expenditures. The total proposed budget is $104.9 million. This is a 6% increase over our previous budget. Personnel services include all salaries, wages, payroll taxes, and employee benefits. The personnel services is $20.3 million. This is a 17.6% increase from last year. Materials and service expenses are operating expenses incurred during normal course of business, including professional services, supplies, utilities, and property and liability insurance. The materials and service budget for this budget is $11.3 million, a 7.3% increase. Capital outlay consists of vehicle and large equipment purchases, as well as infrastructure improvements within the general construction, water, storm, and street funds. The capital outlay is $22.5 million, a 6% decrease from the previous year. Debt service for outstanding financing for capital improvements is $2.8 million, an increase of 1.9%. For the general fund, it includes administration, police services, community development, community services, and a portion of public works. The personnel service in the general fund is $14.4 million, which is a 10.2% increase. For materials and service in the general fund, it's $1.9 million, a decrease of 27.8%. Capital outlay in the general fund is $2.5 million, an increase of 50.1%. And overall, the general fund has an 8.3% budgeted increase. I'm recommending the use of a portion of the general fund ending fund balances as well as one-time revenues to fund one-time expenditures totaling $1,711,045. Our financial policies require an unrestricted fund balance of at least 10% of fund revenue with a goal of 20%. We have prioritized maintaining healthy beginning general fund balances to allow for the city to remain flexible and adaptive to the needs and challenges. The proposed budget funds a total workforce of 103.2 full-time equivalent FTE positions, an increase of 7.5 FTE positions from the current workforce. Of these positions, 1 FTE will be paid from the general fund, with a half FTE paid from the general fund and a grant. The following is a summary of the personnel changes. Add a part-time records coordinator, half FTE in city recorder. Add a community service officer in police with a hire date of 1/1/2023. Add a part-time kitchen coordinator for the senior center. Add 1 install technician in broadband. Add 1 telecommunication lead worker in broadband. Add 4 utility 2 workers in broadband. The city currently pays for PERS between 26.53% and 32.54% of salaries towards retirement for all eligible employees. We use the CPW West Index annual average. This budget includes a 5.1% increase for ASKME and a 5% for all other employees. This budget includes step increases throughout the year for the fiscal year for all employees. This budget is just a proposal. It is, until approved, merely a draft. Your input will only improve the quality of the final product. The budget is a narrative of the reflection of the values of our community, and the approval of the Budget Committee is a statement of support. The final and approved budget is a direct reflection of where we are as a community, spending our time, energy, and our resources. This budget document was a result of a team effort amongst staff and the senior leadership team. I want to specifically acknowledge and thank Leslie Dean, Craig Sheldon, Brad Crawford, Julia Hyduke, Kristen Schweitzer, Ty Hanlon, Sylvia Murphy, Josh Soper, Rebecca Tabra, Adrian Domain-Calkins, and Maya Burbank. And a special thanks to David Bodway, who did an outstanding job in coordinating the proposed budget. I feel humbled and blessed to be able to work with so many outstanding public servants, and I'm blessed to be here with you, and I look forward to this process. Thank you. Any questions on the budget message before we get started on the presentation? No. So we want to start with the general fund 5-year forecast. In front of you is the most recent 5-year forecast. This includes from fiscal year 2017, 2018 through 26-27. I do want to note that the initial budget document, we noticed during our weekend review an error. That error was a result of the Community Services Department, an over calculation in personnel services. That has been corrected, and this forecast adjusts for that correction. We wanted to give a history of the 5-year forecast, so let me explain what you're looking at here. From left to right is the projected 5-year forecast for each fiscal year. So the red line would be the fiscal year forecast for 2018-2019. What we're showing is the trends over time from where we had projected to where we ended up. So from left to right, I'm sorry.
We don't have whatever documents everybody's looking at.
It's this presentation.
We don't have packets.
There's a copy up there.
Oh.
This is more for the front so that you folks won't always have to just turn around and look at your screen.
But we can get
Thank you.
That's too tiny for my good eyes.
Yeah, same.
The purpose of this is to show over time the trends that we've seen and the changes we've seen in the 5-year forecast. The green line on the far right would be the proposed forecast for this budget cycle, looking at that. If you look in the top, the blue line is the actual ending fund balances that were realized at the end of each year. So for instance, in 2018-19, what was budgeted was the 24.1%. What we actually saw was 38%. Currently, what we're projecting going into the end of fiscal year 21-22 is the 40%. Questions or comments or concerns on that?
I just had one quick question.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it looks a lot better because we dropped that PERS match, the 6%, and that's why the chart's starting to look more promising?
I would say we can talk about it in the next slide.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't want to jump the gun on that.
So what is driving the improvement in the general fund performance and the audited financials? One of the things that we talked about is in a GFOA, and the city of Sherwood has always participated in this, and I feel lucky because I believe in this philosophy, is the conservative approach to how we budget instead of the objective approach. So what that means in the conservative approach is that we remain fiscally responsible in the terms of worst case scenario budgeting is the way I would refer to it, where we calculate worst case scenario for outputs. We assume 100% of all the dollars will be spent. We assume that all FTEs will be filled 100% of the time. So what we're basically doing is getting what I would classify as truly a conservative class worst case budget. What this means is over time, as you can see in the previous fiscal years in performance and audited financials, is what was budgeted, what the actuals, and what the differences were for both revenues and expenditures. And what we can see is the impact on funds at the bottom line. So each year you can see we have an increase in terms of beginning fund balance increases because of that conservative approach that we've taken in our budgeting. Tim?
So in 2021, we showed $2 million difference. We received a lot of ARPA money that year.
CARES. Yeah, CARES.
CARES, the first one, CARES. Last year, we put that in, since it was one time, we didn't want it to be part of the forecast. Is that CARES money in that $2 million?
Yes, and I don't recall.
Because there was part of that money that was replacing actual lost revenue, and there was part of it that was.
No, the CARES Act dollars is not like, ARPA dollars can be used to replace lost revenue. CARES Act dollars are actually for expenditures incurred, so it's basically a reimbursement for expenses related to COVID pandemic.
Like our
So
police services and.
police services, whether we, the glass shields, face masks, all the Senate, the whatever the, yeah, PPE, yeah.
We also did a great job accounting, we were able to account for even salaries in police.
Yes.
If I remember right, when we applied for money that no one else in the county was smart enough to apply for it. So thank you for getting that $5 million that year. But my question is, yes, you're right, but we also had budget for some of that stuff, so we kind of double counting on the revenue side of it.
No, you're not double counting it because you're talking about budget and you're talking about actuals. And I like to tell people those are two different worlds. Budget is, your best estimate of where you're going to be for the year, and actuals are basically what you actually spend.
So my recollection was anything that was kind of over actual replacement revenue and actual costs, we were kind of putting into that one-time bucket.
No, I don't recall that. And, I addressed that last year. I was looking kind of through, I did the research on that, and I was looking through the budget committee meetings, and I was very clear in a statement I made on the 5-year forecast. And I can pull it up on screen if we need to, where I did say that it was actually included in the general fund forecast. And then I also brought a supplemental budget in June of 2021 in front of City Council, recognized it in the general fund, and that was approved as well. So, the one thing that you have to be very careful of when it comes to federal funds, they want to see that money go in to the fund, and they want to see those direct expenses. I mean, normally, when it comes to federal awards, they should zero out. Katie, I know you're well aware of this. You got the revenue, you got the expenses, zero at the end of the day.
Yeah, and what I think is important for this committee, that was like a one-time shot. You know, that $2 million difference, there was significant, I guess, a portion that was driven by the CARES funds.
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, how much of that $2 million is CARES funds?
I would have to go see exactly, I think last year I said it was about 1.8 million, but I could bring that back to the committee tomorrow night to see, okay, what exact dollar figure at the end of the day, because, we did have expenditures, but, also it was, even with the ARPA dollars, is whatever's administratively easier to report, and this was considered by the Secretary of State here in the state of Oregon as a low-risk, basically, use of the funds. Some folks might have allocated to higher risk, which during your audits, you could get dinged and you could get risk having to pay that back. So that's why it was allocated here. Now, the city could have requested more funds, but I threw a shot in the dark and I was able to attain what I got, so.
No, and again, super appreciate that. I'm so amazed that other cities did think about that. But I just want to make sure people understand that's why the number is so high. So it's not an opportunity for ongoing.
Well,
We're
that's,
not going to see that next year, the next year, the next year.
It's important if somebody doesn't have this conversation, okay, it's well, I have no record of money like that, that over these last couple of years, that we saw the same thing that's around that and kind of things. My question is, because I'm thinking about my own business and how other businesses, did you let, within this, because I see where you're trying to get this 2 million, but I also think that the 2 million, the money's spent, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
the match is done, was there money left over, and does that go anywhere, or?
I mean,
hang on to mine?
the money was for reimbursement of expenses that already occurred. And so these expenses were from March 1st of 2020 to December 30th of 2020. Even though the federal government extended another 6 months, Washington County, we are basically a subrecipient because we are not a direct award from the federal government. It went to Washington County. Thankfully, Washington County shared that with some of the cities. They did not have to. And they chose not to extend that date to the folks that they were giving this money out to. So it was just that short time frame. That's about 9 months. Yeah, 9 months.
But the net impact, it does, I'm sorry, it does lift our ending balance.
It does lift our ending balance, but what I understand is that ending balances we have asked for one-time expenses. When we have trouble balancing the budget, it's, we're requesting one-time expenses for, and you'll see that up on the slide soon, one-time expenses. And I know last year in the budget, we requested almost $1.5 million in one-time expenses, and this year it's over $1.5 million because you'll see there's some significant, whether it's park improvements or vehicle replacements. So that's kind of what I understood the money is for. Yes, it's a part of ending fund balance. This committee restricts. I don't want to say you restrict. Your policy, the city policy is you'd like to have about a 10% cushion in the general fund. This committee, you would like to see 20%. So you already restrict a pretty good portion of that general fund where we can't dip into, but we do request for those one-time expenses.
I think I understood where Tim was going, though, like the CARES fund to reimburse us for expenses we never would have spent had it not been COVID, PPE, all that stuff. But there were expenses that we did budget for that it also reimbursed us for, which was like the police payroll. So getting reimbursed for that put that police payroll, kept it in the general fund.
Basically what it is, it just unrestricted more funds in the general fund.
Yeah.
For example, like with ARPA, I know we'll have discussions in the future on ARPA, but on ARPA, if I wanted to right now, I could unrestrict all that money, put it in the general fund.
Right, so I'm saying that CARES fund that we got for the expenses that we had budgeted for basically helped our ending balance.
Yes,
Yeah.
It did help the balance.
Yeah, okay.
And for those in the room, that ending balance is really important because that's the ending balance July 1st. We don't get significant tax revenue until November. So we burn that down paying for services until November. That's where we have that ending balance. But the reason I bring it up is because it does get you also on, you just mentioned that we can do one-time projects with that, with capital outlays, which would have a significant impact on this budget if we chose to do that. That's one of the reasons I'm thinking that's going to keep that in a separate bucket.
The one thing, a part of the, and if we get into detail in the general fund forecast, the great thing Public Works does, they forecast out all the fleet replacements, all the facility, whether it's, I guess I want to say fix-its, all the park replacements, that's all included in the general fund balance. So you'll see when we, or in the general fund forecast, so when you see those one-time expenses, you're going to see a significant amount of those expenses related to parks, fleet, and facilities.
Historical, because there was a little bit of iffiness with this, what we're talking about. 20 years from now, when you're doing a bunch of look back and forecasting the future for some reason, 20-year plan, will all that be there for what you're talking about right there?
I made sure of that because one of the trickiest thing is, and if you're, as a director, is we were entering into a 100-year pandemic. There was no data out there. I was trying to refer back to the housing market crash, and that's about the best data any of the directors had. And so we were trying to look at, information, because I did go through, that was my first budget season here. I prepared a budget. COVID hit. I had to fill that all, scrap it all, and we had to start over. I mean, all these directors, we went through 2 rounds of budgets, 2 rounds of projections, and this historical data has been preserved by the way. It's recorded in the general fund, but it's recorded in a way that anybody coming behind me at some point would understand this is COVID related. Basically I preserved the data of all the different departments that saw impacts from this pandemic. So hopefully we don't see this again in our lifetime, but if we do, we have a little bit of data we can look back on and better project things.
Real quick, I just got a request. Some of the people online can't hear people who aren't using their mics, so.
Thank you, I can just become a general conversation.
Just leave them on.
Thank you, I'll remember that.
So, any other, I have a couple more questions, so I don't want to.
So if we're at our next budget meeting, if you could just confirm, what we did receive with CARES, the dollar amount, and in the 5-year forecast, if you could, in addition to the percentage point, just what the 20% line means forecast for each of the 5 years and the projected balance for each of those future 5 years. Not just percentages, but the dollar amount. That'd be great.
Yeah, we're gonna have to be very careful relying on that. Just
I'm
because,
not relying on anything.
No. I'm just saying though, we made decisions based off of that fund balance last year in terms of trying to balancing the budget, whether we add positions, because this was recorded last year. So I just want to make the committee aware that I could provide that, but.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
And I still was curious on the PERS issue, because I know that was very contentious in past years here. Are we still expecting to be saving money because we're not doing that 6% and things are looking better because of that match being gone, or?
The current budget, as proposed, does have the 6% returning for all employees.
Oh, okay. So that benefit is coming back?
Yes.
Okay.
It's proposed, yes.
So David, just a couple more quick questions. So that you answered the question, at least gave us all understanding of how to interpret that kind of starting balance and the impact of the CARES funds. But if you look at last year's forecast in real dollars, it was trending down over 5 years. And this year's forecast in real dollars, it's trending up. What is driving that? Because that's a pretty dramatic shift from year to year. And it kind of, just my initial impressions was it kind of paints a rosy picture. So I'm just concerned because we're potentially looking at another recession here. First quarter GDP was actually negative. And I don't want to be in a position where we're too rosy. So can you talk about what's driving a net increase over 5 years versus last year we forecast a net decrease on a real dollar basis?
Yeah, there's a few things that were driving the forecast. You got to understand, my first two forecasts, you're looking at that orange line where it begins with 28% and the next one 33%. Is you're really trying to understand we were being very conservative. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. How long is this going to last? How long are operations going to be closed down? So we were actually budgeting very conservative. And I understand you look at, yes, you're trending downwards. What I can say is these forecasts in the past were done wrong. Flat out done wrong. When I started, I found holes in the forecast. I'm not blaming anybody. I was not here. They were just done wrong. You actually see where we're actually landing. When we're landing at 38%, 37%, 42%, projecting 40%, my goal is basically as a forecaster, I'm trying to get that difference down to 5% or under. Am I ever going to be able to do that? I don't know, because the driving factor is this screen. It just really depends on how much money we're taking in and really how much money we spend. You know, the one thing I just want to say about the staff that works here at the city is they are very fiscally conservative. They don't spend all the money that they've been allocated because technically they could. I came from a different organization. May and June was a spending spree.
Spend it all.
People wanted to spend 100% of their budget. And you can see just by the differences shown here, we don't do that here. But yes, does it make it, does it look like it's rosy? The one thing we rely on here too much is that 5-year forecast where, yes, it's a guideline, but if I would have looked at everyone in this room, January of 2020 and said, I bet you in 2 months the world would be shut down. So much can change. And I guarantee you, I already know of either retirements or people leaving this position or leaving the city that we're going to have savings in salaries. I know it paints it rosy. One of my goals is we are going to balance our budget.
Well,
I want to balance our business.
I totally
budget.
understand, but at least for me personally, that 5-year forecast is incredibly important and it's one of the reasons I think we've been so successful in having budgets that work over time and not getting ourselves into trouble. To your point, overspending because things are rich today, not looking at the future. So I personally believe they're really important. And if you take the last 4 years, take the ARPA money out of it, CARES money. You're within 1 or 2% every year. That's pretty good. So, in terms of the actuals versus projected for that year. So, we're pretty close. It seems like we've been pretty close. But I would like, and you don't have to answer tonight, I would really like to understand the differences in what's driving. Why is that line going up? What happened in your assumptions or your how you're viewing that and what's turned out from a downward to an upward? Like I can think of one item right now because of the change in the URA footprint, right? Mm-hmm. That would be one driver of it. And because we took a lot of land out of the existing URA, so all those tax rolls came back into the general fund. But we also have a new URA, right? So, what's the impact of that new URA and not seeing the 3% going forward for that area? So it'd just be helpful for me to see that detail and see what those differences are.
And we did calculate that out. I'm going to pop something up on the screen here, and I apologize for folks that are going to have to turn around.
Whatever it is, you'll email whatever the thing is.
Yep. So basically it shows the property tax impact. So let me just zoom into here. I apologize. So you always have your assumed 3% growth.
Yep.
Well, one thing I have to let folks know is the county made a mistake when they entered in. We'll get to that too. They made a mistake in the increment value I told them to use. They actually collected for that original URA. I gave them a figure of about 156 million. The publication they put online about in January or February is 209 million. So we're going to be significantly drawing down that URA more than what was originally projected. We'll get to the URA budget later, but when you looked at, okay, you got your assumed rate of 3%. Now, in this current fiscal year, I'm looking to draw down that URA from, I think it was at a $2.7 million level, and we actually are collecting about $3.5 million because of that error from the county, down to 1.5 million. What is that $388,000 impact on property taxes? That's as if we were getting a 5.5% increase. If you were to compare that to prior year, it's just automatic $388,000 influx of cash. It looks like we're having a 5.5% increase. So you add that to the 3%, you're looking at an 8.5% growth. Well, then you have the impact of the new URA coming online, and I could pull it up or I can send it to you, but there's that report that was a part of the URA packet in May of 2021, the kind of outline potential impacts to the general fund as a result of this new URA. It's a very slow ramp up. It's not going to be till about 2032 till we get to the levels we're at now. We're seeing the impact now from the original URA. So the impact for the new URA, you're talking about minus 1.3%. So when you take into factor the 3%, the 5.5% increase minus the 1.3% increase, we're seeing a total impact of 7.2% growth. And then we've been averaging here at a city, we've been averaging about a 3 to 4% growth, and I only budgeted this upcoming year, I was conservative, 2.8%. So I was conservative.
What's that growth number?
2.8%.
I mean, is that on top of the 3%?
No. It's I don't want to.
Oh, no. No, so you have your total impact, you got your 3%, you got your, the 5.5% minus the 1.3% of the new URA, and then I have additional growth on top of that. So yeah, total growth 10%, but really the driving factor is that 5.5% from the old URA.
And that 2.8% does not include any growth that would be happening in the new URA.
No.
Yeah, that's just the growth from other parts of town.
Yep.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, you get your 3% lift just because that's what the county does every year to your assessed market value. You're saying that we're going to have 2.8% of that additional outside the new URA because of new development.
Development coming online and just new development. I looked at Washington County. When I project this out, Washington County as a county is projecting 4% growth on top of 3%. So 4% growth as a county, but I know that takes into consideration multiple factors. And then the next year in 2024, this upcoming fiscal year is going to be the last year we're going to collect on that original URA. So what is going to be the impact on the general fund? We're going to see in 2024, we're going to see a 3.7% influx of cash. You add that up on the 3%, modestly, and minus the impact of the new URA, you're looking at a total impact of a little over 5%. And I brought our growth down to 2% to be conservative. Try to be conservative. Total increase only 7.8%. And then I'm slowly drawing that back down because I know a lot of the growth is going to be in that new 2021 new URA. I keep using those I keep getting mixed up, but yeah.
Old and new.
Yeah, I want to say old and new, but I know it sounds kind of bad. But so I've been slowly drawing it down, knowing that there's a lot of development out there, but I've been trying to be pretty conservative, even in the average growth that the city has seen over the year. I compared the last 5 years, we've actually been at 6.85%, just total growth. When you look at the growth of this whole forecast, we're actually growing under that, 6.69%. I was just trying to continue on with our conservative approach.
Question about the FY25 then. You have 2.8%, 2%, and then all of a sudden it jumps up to 5%. What's accounting for that?
What's accounting for that? I know it's just the timing of some of these larger developments. I could have sat there and spread it out, but it's really when there are these large developments going to be coming online. I know down in the Brookman area, we have some development. I was kind of looking at Julia puts together that great quarterly economic, and unfortunately we're going to miss that economic report. So I was studying that. Okay, what kind of growth is out there? What kind of properties are coming online? And then additionally, we've always been very conservative here at the city, where we factor in a 5% uncollected rate. I was going to change that pre-pandemic, but I thought I had no idea. Is there going to be a lot of foreclosures? our business is going under, people are going to start losing their homes. It never panned out. We've been averaging less than 2% uncollected rate. So I'm actually just dropping that down to 3%, still being conservative for a little wiggle room, because we know we're in inflationary times, things are expensive. There's talk about a potential recession. So I didn't draw it down exactly to where we're actually landed, but I was a little conservative to leave that 1% buffer. Yes.
I was going back to the 5-year forecast and the question Katie asked about PERS, and if I recall, it was 2 years ago, the yellow line, where we kind of thought it was doom and gloom as 5 years was approaching the 10% mark, and ended up making that tough decision. But you're saying that was your first budget, right? And you were just kind of following the model that had been in place? And so since then, you've found some holes, you've updated your model, and we're forecasting for 5 years out at 26%.
Yes, I'm still forecasting conservatively, because one thing, I would never want to come in and say, you know what, this is all done wrong, I'm just going to totally change this. Now, look, everything's rosy. You probably would have said, who hired this guy? So I've been slowly getting us up. You can see we're trending up to where we're actually really landing. Now, I still want to be conservative, because we know there was a big impact from the CARES Act dollars. That's sitting in the general fund. We're loving that when we use it for all these one-time, whether we're replacing park structures this year. It's going to be one of the requests, or some of the city hall vehicles where we can't find parts anymore because those Jeeps are so old. There's going to be some of the requests. So yeah, we did see a benefit from that, and we want to be very cautious and just slowly spend that down. But one of my goals here is to balance this budget to where I'm not having to come to city council and say, I need additional $1.5 million in one-time expenses. I mean, ultimately, that should be your goal, because it's not going to last forever. And so far right now, in about 2024-25, we've balanced the budget, but I know something's going to happen next year. Someone's going to request a new employee that will change that whole assumptions.
So can I make a request for the next meeting? I mean, can you go back to that spreadsheet?
Yep.
Do you want to just go through the spreadsheet?
Do you want me to go through it?
Just a quick thing. I'm concerned that your growth numbers in 25, 26, and 27 are high. Can we rerun that with kind of what we've typically, a lower number, like 2%? Because if we enter a recession here, of course, that's going to change everything. So I'd like to see a stress test of this. Let's assume growth numbers are really low.
Alternate forecast with different assumptions.
With different assumptions that those growth numbers are low. Because that 4.5 and 4 does give us a nice little kick in there if it happens, right? So, in the last recession we had, we didn't see a lot of development for 3-4 years. So, everything just came to a halt. So that's kind of, I'd like to see a stress test of this, if that makes sense.
And that's not a problem, man. The last recession was a housing market recession. This is not a inflationary supply. We're looking at more an inflationary supply chain recession versus a housing market recession.
Well,
but I understand the impacts.
But it was driven by a housing bubble, and you can make a strong argument right now. We have a pretty big bubble right now with housing prices. Yeah. So.
But I just think it's generally good practice. Like when I do forecasting at work, we always have a range. Here's the most conservative. Here's an aggressive, and here's a middle approach. Right?
Yeah.
So.
To that point, like if you use kind of the 2008 recession model and use kind of those assumptions, what would this look like?
And now, would it be appropriate, though, to use we were very, I just lost my screen. Would it be appropriate to use, we were very conservative in our expenditure approach when in terms of comes to that CPI West index, which we use for our COLAs. We budgeted 4%, thinking, some stuff might be happening behind the scenes we're unaware of, that I'm unaware of, but I could probably argue that could be lower. When I look at, when I was studying Forbes, you have they're predicting this could be under 4% by the end of 2022. Another trading economics forecast, they have inflation at 1.9% in 2023. The St. Louis Federal Reserve, they're projecting 2.5 to 3.2%. And then there's a lot of consensus out there that it will be around 3 years, 5-year average of 3%.
For COLA.
For COLA versus the 4% we built in. So, we were very aggressive too on expenses. And one of the things I wanted to share with folks, when it comes to facility and equipment, the average growth we've seen over this, the last 4 years, 8.71%. Because of the supply chain issues, because of the inflationary times we're dealing with, I'm actually pretty much doubling that. And over the next 5 years, we're going to average almost a 17% increase. Probably going to come down. I hope it comes down. But the one unpredictability that I keep asking myself and I keep trying to research, are companies going to get used to that nice profit margin, and are we only going to go up from there? Or are they going to correct course and come back down?
Right.
So I took the conservative approach of they might just continue upwards.
But it's a great point, and as Mr. Shannon pointed out, we can only use SDCs for capital projects. Once we build something, we have to take care of it out of the general fund, right? Parks, roads and all that. So the construction costs increase have been dramatic in the last couple of years. So that's part of why I'm thinking we need to look at this from a stress test point of view too. So.
I think we're getting enough questions. I think we can just go through all of the assumptions that went into the 5-year forecast, so we can have that.
Yeah, okay. And benefits, we've seen an increase of the average growth of 10.79%. We forecasted higher than that. We're looking at average 5-year forecast growth of 11.36%.
10.7 is based off of how much of a look back?
The last 4 years. Yeah.
As in employee benefits?
Yeah. And what's the driving factor of that? Let's look at the PERS costs. These are the biennium rates that have already been set. They're already set for this upcoming fiscal year. These rates have already been, I want to say, issued. We know these rates. These will be in next year's budget, so beginning of July 1st, 2024. And I projected even a higher growth, just projecting out what could the growth be, 4 years down the road. But the interesting thing was, and this is something maybe council will be happy to hear, whether it actually pans out, we'll see. But they have this projection tool at PERS, and they're actually projected in the 2033-34 biennium, the city of Sherwood's going to peak and actually the costs are going to actually start going back down. Now, I know you guys are all